I am delighted to be joined by Alex Marson for today's discussion, where we'll be taking a look at an exciting new tool from our partner at Collins called Adapt. Adapt is a new digital learning platform that combines the best learning content from Collins with the power of a truly adaptive platform used by 30 million learners worldwide. The platform supports every student with a data-driven approach to intervention to improve outcomes and engagement for the whole class without changing the way you teach. So thank you so much, Alex, for joining us today. Really looking forward to going to Adapt in more depth, seeing the platform in action. And we're going to start with just a few questions about the background inception of Adapt, how it can help develop a more personalized learning journey for students. Then Alex is, and then you're going to walk through the platform itself, and then we'll go from there. And then we'll include some links for you guys to get a free demo of Adapt as well, and then also an email to get in touch for further information should you wish to discuss with the Collins team. Great, Alex. So yeah, like I said, thanks so much for joining us. And we're going to start off with my first question. What was the journey to the creation of Adapt from Collins?
Yeah, so thanks very much for having me. So the journey to the creation of Adapt. So we started working with our technology partners, Area 9, a few years ago. They're specialists in this area of adaptive learning and exploring what a Collins adaptive learning offering or product might look like, creating some kind of initial learning samples. Then a couple of years ago, we ran a quite extensive pilot with a number of primary and secondary schools. So we used that pilot phase to really kind of mold the product into what it now looks like, and I'll show you what it looks like in a little while. Both in terms of the look and feel, the functionality that teachers would expect from this kind of platform, and also the content. It's also really useful for us to start thinking about the different learning contexts in which teachers might use this kind of platform. And I would just say, actually, on our website, collinsadapt.co.uk, there are some excellent case studies from those pilots if anyone is interested to read a little bit more about them. We then launched the product into schools at the beginning of last year, and then that was initially with predominantly UK curriculum content across primary and secondary. And then this year we've launched some IGCSE content. Most recently, in the last couple of weeks, we've launched some content for IGCSE Science. And a little bit earlier this year, a couple of months ago, the platform was nominated for 3 awards at BET, the Education Technology Awards, and we won the award for Best Secondary Technology product. So yeah, that's a kind of a potted history of Adapt.
Fantastic. And it'd be great to learn a little bit more about the technology behind it. You mentioned this was in partnership with Area 9. It'd be great to hear a little bit about the tech behind this tool.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, our technology partners, Area 9, it's a Danish company that's been working in this space for a really long time, specialists in the area of adaptive learning, and over a period of a number of years actually have developed a highly sophisticated algorithm or series of algorithms that individualizes learning for students. They actually started off working in a range of different kind of learning contexts, but quite high stakes learning environments, like with pilots and in medicine, for example, the kinds of things, I guess, where you want to be able to rely on an adaptive learning algorithm to make sure people really have taken in what's being presented to them. And then it's over the past few years that's then been rolled out to different learning environments, like the one that we're interested in, which is of course schools, and that's where we're able in the partnership to kind of bring our own expertise, being close to schools and to teachers, and also being able to draw on our kind of fantastic content at Collins. One other just thing I would mention briefly, and I will come back to this in a second actually when I'm showing the platform, but it's just the concept of metacognition, which is something that makes Adapt and the algorithm that powers it unique kind of in comparison with some of the other adaptive products out there. So equally as important as the answers students are giving as they they kind of make their way through the learning content is the confidence level they indicate. So for each question they're presented with, they have to indicate whether they're very confident, not confident at all, or somewhere in between. And the algorithm is taking both of those things into account, the answer and the confidence level, when determining where to take them next. As I say, more on that in a little while.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alex. And yeah, my sort of final intro question. It'd be great to just give us a bit of more of a background as you know, to adaptive learning in more generally, and then we'll sort of segue into the presentation itself, looking at the platform itself. So yeah, over to you, Alex, and if you want to frame the introduction of adapt learning, and then we'll go into the platform itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will speak about this more in a second, but in a nutshell, with adaptive learning, we're talking about creating individual, tailored learning journeys for students based on their own inputs. There are loads of benefits to this approach, which I'll come on to in a second. It's very much where Adapt sits. So really kind of focused learning that takes into account what the student already knows and what they need to learn more about.
Great stuff. All right, Alex, over to you. I'll let you share your screen, and yeah, looking forward to seeing the platform.
Perfect. So what I'm going to do first of all is just share a couple of slides to kind of give some context to the demo, and then yeah, plan is very much to show you what Adapt looks like, both from a student's perspective and then also from a teacher's perspective, and how you might go about using it day to day. We were just talking about adaptive learning, so a bit of a recap and a comparison, I guess, between what you might term traditional learning and adaptive learning. So traditional learning approach, where everybody's getting the same content, the same learning content. They're having to answer the same number of questions about whichever topic it is they're covering, and realistically, there's a risk of people being left behind if they don't understand a concept, because you're kind of moving through in a way that's uniform. Then with an adaptive approach, more time and focus spent on the areas that the students are struggling with. That's really the key thing. So no time kind of wasted on areas that the platform has already determined that a student is confident in, but plenty of time spent on those areas that they might be struggling with and need a little bit more focus on. I'll also, for sure, when we get to the demo, talk a little bit about how you can take advantage of that as a teacher. So the reporting that you're able to access in Adapt surfaces a lot of this information about where exactly, right down to a very granular level, the either individual students or classes of students are struggling. So just framed slightly differently, some benefits of adaptive learning in the classroom. So time saved, that's obviously a crucial thing for teachers. Time's always a premium. So both in the kind of planning and marking and creating more time for teaching opportunities that are focused specifically where they're needed. And then the other thing I guess I would flag from this slide particularly is increased student engagement. The learning is meaningful to the students because it's kind of focused and targeted to them. Therefore, they're going to be more engaged, and all of those things together kind of bringing improved learning outcomes. Bringing it back to Adapt specifically, so how is Adapt adaptive? Supporting every student individually, creating that unique learning pathway. So no two students are going to make their way through a particular piece of work in exactly the same way. It'll take them slightly different amounts of time, but they'll also potentially see different questions. They might see more questions on a particular area that they're struggling with compared with their neighbour. Going as slowly as we need, it'll take its time if needs be. It won't just move them on if they're struggling. It will take that time to make sure that knowledge is kind of bedded in. A range of different uses. We've got schools using Adapt in a multitude of different ways: homework, consolidation, revision. Some schools using it in the classroom, some schools exclusively using it at home. What you'll find as you kind of learn more about the platform is that it can really be built into your way of teaching, however you see fit. I mentioned data. That's a really key part, I guess, of any learning platform, but certainly of Adapt, creating those data profiles to help you as a teacher to support learners. So identifying where there might be gaps in their knowledge, as well as the more kind of day-to-day things like double checking that they've done their homework. And ultimately all kind of building towards building grit and resilience in students, and this idea of a growth mindset, which I'm sure everyone will be familiar with. So just before I go into the demo, a little bit on metacognition. So again, I'm sure it's a word lots of people will have heard. It's been a big kind of buzzword in education for a little while now. And kind of at the core of it is thinking about what students know about what they know. So encouraging them to think each time they answer a question, or at least in the case of Adapt, think each time they answer a question about whether they truly understand the kind of concepts being tested. So metacognition is developing students' reflection skills, confidence in their own knowledge, and promoting those skills like a growth mindset, resilience, and grit that I was just talking about before. And it's really kind of the key USP of Adapt, as I mentioned before, in comparison to some of the other kind of adaptive learning software and products that are out there. How exactly does Adapt use metacognition? So I touched on this briefly a second ago. This is an example of a question, and I'll show you this in the platform shortly. Each time I'm asked a question, yes, I have to give an answer, but I also have to indicate my confidence level. And as I said, as far as Adapt is concerned, as far as the algorithm is concerned, it's taking both of those pieces of data into account when determining where to take me next. So if I answer a question correctly and confidently, the chances are that might well be the last question I see that's kind of targeting that very specific area of knowledge, because the platform will be kind of satisfied that I've mastered that specific area. But if I either answer incorrectly or partially correctly in the case of some of the questions, or if I answer with a low level of confidence, the likelihood is that I will then encounter other questions targeting this area as I move through the activity I'm doing. Okay, very last slide before we have a look at the platform. Confidence ratings, as I say, the unique core of Adapt, used very much to map those unique learning pathways that I talked about and create that unique individual learner profile, helping the students to develop reflection skills and confidence in their own learning. One of the really interesting things that you'll see using Adapt is that growth in confidence as students start to engage more with the kind of metacognitive aspect of the platform. They start to take those confidence ratings more seriously, and you tend to then be able to see from the data that's available to you as a teacher how their kind of confidence develops, which is a really interesting aspect. Steering us away from repetition of what we already know, and crucially focusing on those things, spending time on those things that we haven't quite grasped and might need a little bit more time on. So I think with that, I'm just going to briefly unshare and reshare, if that's okay. I think that might be the easiest way. Sorry, that was a bit clunky. I did say it might be.
Just fine, just fine. Just splice this out, no problem.
Right, okay, all good. You seeing that? As I said, my plan now is to give you a run through of the Adapt platform. First of all, we're going to look at it from a student or a learner's perspective. So have a look, what do the activities look like? How does the student interact with the platform? And then also want to make sure we've got time to have a look at it from a teacher's perspective. So we'll have a look at some of the kind of the day-to-day activities from a teacher's perspective, like setting some work. I want to show you how straightforward that is to do, but then also spend a little bit of time looking at the reporting that I've touched on already, and the benefits that can bring to you as a teacher using Adapt. So starting off as a student, so I've logged in here as a student with access to a handful of activities. This screen is the student dashboard, so the first page they would see when they log in. Very simple layout, really. I've got my activities in the center here in the section titled To Do. As I complete activities, they'll move over to the left-hand side into a section called Previously Completed. I can duck back into them if I want to, and also worth adding that the platform will serve activities I've previously completed back to me as kind of refresh activities periodically. That's a quite important part of the kind of adaptive element actually of the platform. When that happens, it'll be focusing very specifically on just the one or two areas that I might have struggled with the first time round. That'll continue to happen until the platform is satisfied that I've fully kind of mastered that particular area of knowledge. This student dashboard is completely curated by the teacher. So the teacher logs into Adapt and sets work. That might be just the one module, or it might be a handful of modules, and it's up to the teacher whether that's kind of time limited or whether it's open-ended. There is also an option for you as a teacher to just make the content available to the students kind of en masse. A slightly different way of using it, but kind of equally valid. And we sometimes see that used particularly for things like revision. So kind of in the lead up to exams, it may be that you just want to give the students the option to use Adapt as one of the tools they've got available to them for revision purposes, so they can log in, find the particular area they specifically want to focus on, and kind of make their way through it in their own time. But what we're looking at here is very much a screen whereby you can imagine that this student belongs to one or a few classes, and the teacher has selected a handful of modules based on what they've been working on to set for the student to complete. So let's have a look at one of these. We'll go for chemistry. Sorry, I should say this is all IGCSE science content as well that we're looking at. And I will remember before we finish to just recap on the different subjects and different levels that we have available in Adapt. That's probably quite an important thing to mention. So I've opened up a module. It's going to launch straight in with a kind of diagnostic question. So in Adapt, the way the content is structured is it's broken down into kind of helpful topics that kind of map to the curriculum as you would expect. And then behind the scenes, it's broken down into really, really granular learning objectives. So that's a crucial part of the adaptive nature of the platform. It's a kind of a requisite for the algorithm. So as the algorithm can genuinely kind of build a full picture of exactly where students are struggling. It's also really useful for you as a teacher, because it means that when you are kind of looking at the data output from Adapt, it enables you to really kind of drill down into exactly where either a specific student or a group of students has been struggling. So diagnostic question, in this case, it's a kind of fill the gap exercise. We'll only probably look at a couple of questions now, but it's worth saying that there's a massive kind of range of questions and question types in Adapt. You have yes, fill in the gap exercises, kind of multiple choice exercises, drop downs, kind of matching exercises, right through to in some areas of science, but certainly in maths, kind of more complex calculation-based questions where the platform will assess both your method and then obviously your final answer as well. So I'm you'll recognize this screen from the slide I showed in the presentation. So I've got my question to answer. I've also got my 4 confidence buttons here. So let's just go for, try and get this one correct first time. He says, hopefully. I know it. So in this instance, I've answered the question correctly. It's let me know that I've answered it correctly. I can move on to the next one. Another fill in the gap question. So let's say in this case, I'm not so sure about the answer, which as it happens, I'm not certain I am so confident about the answer to this particular question. So let's just say, in this case, I'm going to say I'm not sure. As it happens, the answer is incorrect. So immediately the platform will now be starting to kind of build out a learner profile for me based on my answer and confidence level here. What you'll see straight away is that my incorrect answer is presented back to me next to the correct answer, and that would be the same regardless of the question type. If it was a more complex question type, then it might show me a kind of a worked solution on the right hand side. In this case, it's just the correct words go in the gap. And then the other thing that you'll notice is that it's presenting me with the option to learn more. So I can click on this here. It'll feed me some learning content based on this particular kind of topic area, which I can read through and which should put me in a better position to answer the next question I'm presented with correctly. Because it's fair to assume, having answered this question incorrectly this time and with a low level of confidence, I will definitely be revisiting this area before I finish. So I think what I would say is, in order to really get a sense of the range of question types, if you, on our website, which we'll put up onto the screen at the end of the session, there's a page here, take a quick look, which allows you to kind of view the platform from a student's perspective, also from a teacher's perspective. But if you were to make your way through a couple of activities from a student's perspective, you'd really build up a kind of broad picture of the range of question types that you're likely to see as you set work from ADAPT. But for now, I think what I'm going to do is return, first of all, to the dashboard, and then I think I will pivot across to looking at the platform from a teacher's perspective. So there we go, you should be seeing that now. So I mentioned that the student, when they first log in, sees a dashboard, and it's much the same for a teacher. So this is, I guess, the teacher's version of that same or similar kind of dashboard view. So what I'm seeing as a teacher when I first log in on my dashboard is all of my classes on the right hand side. So these are the classes I'm responsible for. And then in the center, I'm seeing all of the kind of activities that are active at the moment. So these are the pieces of work that I've set for classes that have either been completed or almost completed, or in some cases probably not quite started, like down here. I can also, from this dashboard, kind of access just about everything I would need. So I guess the two kind of crucial day-to-day things from a teacher perspective would be setting some work. So I've got the set work option over on the left-hand side here, and checking whether students have done that work, which I can access via the reports button on the left-hand side here. And I think those are the two things I'm going to focus on predominantly. Just before I kind of drill into those, I will briefly mention a couple of other things. So the library allows me to really kind of dig into the content. So I know that's important for lots of teachers when they first start using a new platform. They want to be able to familiarize themselves with the content before they start setting it for students. So the library contains all of the content I have access to as a teacher or as a school, and I can review the questions, review the kind of the supporting material before going in and starting to set pieces of work. And I mentioned my classes on the right-hand side. From here, I can also access kind of the administrative, I guess, elements of Adapt. So resetting passwords, all the sorts of things I'm sure you'll be familiar with from using other digital platforms, but we won't spend too much time looking at that today. So let's have a look at setting some work. So if I click on set work here, so the first thing, select my class. So let's select Year 10 Science. You'll notice that I can select multiple classes. That's a kind of, it seems like a minor thing, but an important kind of differentiator with some other platforms as well that require you to kind of set the same piece of work over and over again. If you've got multiple classes in a year group, for example, that are kind of working to roughly the same schedule, then you can set the same piece of work to multiple groups at the same time. I then have the option to set, by default, I'd be setting the work for all of the students in the class, but I do also have the option just to set it for selected students. So if you have groups where students in the class are working at a range of different ability levels, you have the option to set slightly different or differentiated pieces of work for students in the class. Coming very soon is the ability to create subgroups within the class. So you'd be able to set the work either for all the students, for selected students, or for a specific subgroup. Self-study, I actually did touch on briefly before, although I don't think I necessarily used the word self-study. That's the option I was describing, whereby you can set a large kind of chunk of content for the students, for them to kind of dip in and out of as they see fit, potentially for revision purposes. So I would then select my content or subject. So in this case, these are UK curriculum packs, but you'd see the same sort of thing for an IGCSE pack if you had access to that, with broken down into the three sciences. Actually, also in the case of IGCSE science, broken down into the different kind of curricula for IGCSE science. So combined and coordinated science would be represented separately here if you had access to both. So let's say we'll stick with chemistry because I think that's what I picked before. So if I pick AQA GCSE chemistry, the next thing I'm going to see is a list of all of the modules that make up GCSE chemistry in this case. I can pop that out into its own window. So these are the topic areas that would map very much to the curriculum. So obviously you'll be teaching a curriculum that you're familiar with as soon as you go into Adapt and start trying to set work. The kind of the layout once you get into this area will be familiar to you. So you have a kind of overall topic area and then a subtopic, which is the focus of the learning objectives in this particular module. One really neat thing is that within those modules, so I guess the easiest thing here would be to say, okay, we've been talking about atoms, elements, and compounds, so I will tick that box and move on. But what I can also do to kind of tailor the work further is click on the pencil icon here, and then what I can open up is a list of all of the learning objectives that make up that particular module. So it may be that, yes, we have been talking about atoms, elements, and compounds, but we haven't yet got to equations. Therefore, I can get rid of the equation section of the module, and I can always come back and set that a little bit later. As you use the platform more and more, you can also see on this page what you've set before, which is useful later on in the year when you might not be able to remember what you were setting towards the beginning of the year. So let's say I'm setting that module. I can then give the piece of work a title. So let's say it's 31st August homework. And then, of course, I can set start and end dates or not. So I can either have these assignments as or pieces of work as open-ended, or I can set them with a fixed end date or to end after a certain number of days. Likewise, with the start date, I can either have them appear immediately. If I click that, then the next time the students log in, that work will appear on their dashboard. Or for the very organized teachers, you have the ability to set a kind of fixed date for the start date. So if I wanted to, for example, set up my assignments for the coming term, I could do that in such a way that the students wouldn't be overloaded by tasks when they first log in. They would appear kind of each week as and when those start dates come around. So yeah, I mean, I've obviously talked in a bit of detail about each area of this form, but hopefully what you can see from that is that it's an incredibly straightforward process, and that actually once you've done that a couple of times, that really is 30 seconds or a minute or so to set work, potentially even for a kind of a number of classes. So really straightforward. Then lastly, I do want to look a little bit at reports and data. So I mentioned, of course, you have this button over button on the left-hand side called reports. So that's going to open up all of the reporting I have access to as a teacher within Adapt. But I will just quickly flag that there are a couple of other areas you can access the reporting. So if I were to log in and I was specifically interested in week 3 homework for this class because I'm about to go into the classroom with them and I want to just double check kind of high level how they got on, who did it, who didn't. I can access the reporting specifically for that assignment by clicking the icon here. And likewise, if I'm just interested in looking at the reporting for a specific group, then I have the same icon over on the right-hand side here. But for the purposes of the demo, I'll click on the reports icon on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side. So initially, it's going to load up this page, which just gives me a very kind of high-level overview. So who's been logging in, or how many people have been logging in each day, who's active versus inactive in the platform. And I mean, you would generally expect to see more in the green segment than the red segment, but we're coming off the back of the summer holidays, which probably explains the large chunk of red. But that's, again, just giving you a heads up as a teacher if students are not logging in. I think they would appear in the red segment if they hadn't logged in the last 30 days. Then I've got a kind of, as again, a high-level overview of my classes. These are the couple of classes that this particular teacher has access to. I can see how many pieces of work have been set for each of them, and then the kind of average completion of the students in the class. So if I then drill into one of them, year 10 science, for example, first off, I have the same information I had before, but specific to this group. So inactive versus active and number of logins per day. But then as I start to scroll down, I've got some more detailed reports. So first off, these are the couple of bits of work that have been set for this group. So week 1 homework, week 2 homework. I can see the average completion, total time spent. I can also drill down into one of those homeworks if I want to see specific data related to one of the homeworks. I won't do that for a second. I'll just keep scrolling down to show you the other reporting that's available. Trickiest learning objectives. This I kind of touched on a couple of times, I think, as I was going through. So here I can see for this group, year 10 science, across the group, which are the learning objectives that have been causing them the most difficulty. So these are, I don't know how clearly you can see the wording here, but so for example, the top learning objective, determine the acidity or alkalinity of a solution using the pH scale. So as discussed, very granular learning objectives, which allow you as a teacher to kind of make decisions about where you might need to spend more time in the classroom. You can see this trickiest learning objectives report for an overall class as we're looking at now, or you can see it for each homework or each assignment you set, or I can see it for a specific student. So that might not be something that you're doing every day, but if a particular student is struggling, it might be useful, or in the lead up to writing reports, it might be useful. And what's the other thing? And for things like parents' evenings or parent meetings, it can be useful as well. If I keep scrolling down, I've got now a kind of, I guess, a slightly more detailed version of the report above, showing the assignments that have been set for this group. So in this case, you've got each of the students down the left-hand side and the assignments across the top, week 1 homework and week 2 homework. You can see who has and hasn't completed it and how long it's taken them. and I can drill down into each student to see more information about that student. I think that that's broadly the case in all of the reports, that I can kind of drill into to them to see a kind of more detailed view. But I guess the interesting thing to flag here is just the different amount of time it might take different students in the class to complete pieces of work, and that is kind of par for the course with adaptive learning, because it will take the time to kind of guide students through areas that they're struggling with. And then lastly, this report at the bottom, student metacognition. So this is just surfacing a bit of information about the student's metacognition, which I obviously talked about in the demo and in the earlier presentation. So what you're seeing here is the percentage of the time in which students have been in each of what we call the kind of metacognition quadrants. So that's ranging from unconsciously incorrect, that's the red. So unconsciously incorrect means I've answered a question incorrectly, but I said I thought I knew it, or I said I knew it. Right through to the kind of deep green, which is consciously correct, which is where you want to get all of the students to. So they're answering the questions correctly and with a high level of confidence. In between, you've got the other kind of the other combination. So you've got the students that are maybe answering correctly but not confidently. So you want to improve their confidence. And then you've also got the students that are answering incorrectly but understanding that they perhaps don't know that particular bit of information. And I mean, I touched on this briefly earlier, but it is really interesting. Certainly our user schools have found it interesting to kind of track this over the course of the year or over the course of the time that they're using Adapt, and see how students' confidence evolves as they use it more and get used to the kind of metacognition aspect of the platform. So I think I mean, I could certainly talk at greater length about the reporting, and there are more things I could show, but I think that gives a kind of overview of what's available to you as a teacher. And I think that just about wraps up the demo.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Alex. That's fantastic, and the platform looks really great. Especially there's a few key points that I thought were really great. The use of data profiles, really cool. Use of metacognition, obviously, to help learners in quite a unique way here, and the really friendly, clear reporting as well, and user friendliness of the platform itself. Also, particularly like the confidence tracker, and then the fact that you can track that over time and see how their confidence increases throughout the academic year, I think is a really great feature. So yeah, just to reiterate the subjects there, Alex. So this is currently for mathematics, science, and humanities. Is that correct? The platform?
Yeah, that's right. So as I said, we launched with UK curriculum content. So there are courses available for history, geography, maths and science at kind of lower secondary and GCSE level using UK curriculum content. There are then courses available for IGCSE, maths and science. And then lastly, and we haven't really talked about it too much today, and the interface, particularly from a student's perspective, looks a little bit different. There is some content for primary school as well, so specifically for primary maths. And I mentioned the page on the website that allows you to take a quick look. If you were interested to see how it differs slightly for maths, then that would allow you to do so. So I think that covers all of the subject areas. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And like you said, it's currently for IGCSE. And do you have any plans to sort of expand the offering by curriculum at all?
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking into the best way of doing that at the moment. We obviously, as Collins, have an awful lot of content, both for the international primary curriculum and for the Cambridge lower secondary curriculum across a range of subjects. So yeah, we will be looking to broaden the offering as quickly as we can.
Brilliant. And just one final thing, I thought when you were going through the platform, it's super detailed, the way that the teacher can control the questions coming up and remove certain questions that they might not have covered yet. Is there any way that the teachers can actually tailor the questions themselves? And if not currently, is that a plan for the future at all?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. At the moment, no, there isn't. So the questions kind of come as they are. But yes, it is something we're looking at actually, and it's something that came up from time to time in the pilot, and yeah, again comes up with some of our user schools. So I guess it would be, I think we would always see our kind of verified high quality content being kind of core to the offering, but potentially for that the ability for that to be kind of supplemented by content created by the teacher, I think is in the future for Adapt. Yeah, I would think.
Right. I think it's a really exciting platform, and yeah, obviously the future of learning is to make it more and more personalized as we go, right? So yeah, this is going to be a really great tool, and obviously already being used in some schools to great effect. So what we'll do is we'll put a link to the free demo in this article, and we'll also put there's an email in the article as well that you can get in touch with someone at Collins that can discuss the platform further and see how it can be tailored to your needs in your school. But yeah, thanks so much again for your time, Alex. And I'm really looking forward to seeing Adapt grow and develop into the future and offer more value to students and teachers.
Great, thanks for having me.